Hmm. Everybody, welcome to the channel and just enjoy watching. Let's start.
Is this alright? It was kind of embarrassing that she knew enough to ask that type of question. Not a lot of people knew. They just thought he was a stereotypical guy, and stereotypical guys didn't really get all mushy-gushy with other people. They were emotionless, unfeeling, and didn't that just fit him perfectly. But, right now, as she sat on the edge of his bed, looking down at him, she didn't really seem to be treating him like a stereotypical guy. She treated him like he was someone with boundaries, like a normal, human being. She treated him like she would to anyone she looked down upon in the dead of night, looming over their form, left hand pressed precariously close to their pillow. She asked that question, and it was embarrassing, but he was glad she did. Naruto had this deal about him where he sometimes, oh, fucking hell, I'm calling her, acted like a jackass. It was almost midnight, 23 minutes away from it, in fact. Sasuke knew, because every time Naruto groaned or huffed in his bed, twisting or turning, grumbling to himself, he checked the time on his phone before tucking it away and trying, once again, to go back to sleep. It was 23 minutes away from midnight when Naruto finally gave up on trying to go to bed, and when he turned on his phone, the light was so bright that Sasuke squinted from his bed a couple feet away. God. Fuck, he hissed. What the hell are you doing? Naruto didn't answer until the phone was pressed against his left ear, humming a drone tone. I'm calling Hinata. What? I'm calling Hin. I heard you, dumbass. Sasuke was now sitting up in his bed, as well, tapping the screen of his phone for perhaps the 30th time to see the time. Why? Naruto snorted, but didn't answer. Sasuke frowned. She won't answer. It's late. She's probably. The droning stopped, and Naruto smiled at the wall. Hinata. God in heaven. Yeah, it's happening again. I dunno, I guess I'm just too excited to sleep. Listening in on the one-sided conversation was a little invasive, but it wasn't like Sasuke could go anywhere. Naruto was talking so loud into the speaker that he'd be able him even if he went into the hallway. So Sasuke gave a tired, annoyed sigh and rested the back of his skull against the wall. I mean, yeah, sure, that could be it. But I think it's because I miss you so much. The tip of his mouth raised in a sneer. God. Then sneak past them. Naruto whined into the phone. Now he was the one acting like a dog. Come on, Hinata. Just do this for me. I need you. God, you're disgusting, Sasuke muttered, just loud enough for Naruto to hear him. You sound like you're in the honeymoon stage. I can't believe she lets you talk to he that. What? Naruto shouted, moving his mouth just far enough from the mic to not destroy Hinata's poor ears on the other end. Hinata loves it when I talk to her like this. Don'tcha, Hinata. There was a small pause. Oh, Sasuke was just saying this shit about how we sound like we're in the honeymoon stage. Don't tell her I said that, he snapped. He didn't know why, but the image of her now having that idea in her head felt unsettling, and his stomach got tight. Naruto stared at him through the dark for a moment, then turned back to his phone. Now he's jealous. He's jealous, Hinata. He's jealous of our love. Shut up. Sasuke bundled up one of his extra blankets and threw it at Naruto's head, who dodged it with little effort. Ha. Hurry, Hinata. Looks like Sasuke wants you to come, too. You fucker. Naruto ended the call, grinning. She's coming over. Just for you. Die. Sasuke barked. Just go die. It was like his body was slowly turning into a tree. It was like he couldn't bend his joints anymore. His limbs were all straight and stiff. The hills of his knees were flat. His palms were pushed against the springs of the mattress. It was like he was slowly losing control of his body, slowly turning into a tree. A tree in the middle of Kansas, because he was also quite sure he was shaking. Not like noticeable shaking. Not like really bad, body completely trembling shaking. It was just a vibration in his legs, in the core of his abdomen. He felt ill, suddenly. Probably because he was being kept up by Naruto. That was probably it. Ellipsis. You have to listen for the secret code. Naruto was whispering like they were in some spy movie. And, sure, they could get in mild trouble if someone caught on to the fact that a girl was coming to their dorm room in the middle of night, but he was really overexaggerated this shit. Secret code. Yeah, in the knock. Then can't we just listen for the knocking? No. Sasuke, are you stupid? What if it's someone else? Who else would be coming here at midnight? Man, just, and then there was knocking. Soft, going along to a beat that sounded somehow familiar. Good God, she was actually playing along. That's her. Naruto crept out of bed and went to the door, unlocking it slowly to keep from making too much noise. The moment the door was open, Hinata slipped inside, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one had seen her come inside. Sasuke could hear the swish of her slippers on the floor as she scooted inside, face barely lit in light of Naruto's phone. Hey, did you get seen? No, she was whispering, too. Seriously, it was like the two of them were meant for each other. I don't think so. That's my girl. Why did it feel different when a girl was in your room at night? It was the same as her being there during the day, just dark. And quiet, not just because of the whispering, but because of everything else, too. When it was day, he could hear students on campus, or people walking up and down the hallways. Could hear the muffled talk of his neighbors, sometimes. When there was noise, it didn't seem so isolating. But everyone was asleep, unaware of the girl in their room. They were alone. Or, well, Naruto was there, too. But, still, something in his spine popped when he watched Naruto grab her hand and pull her to his bed. Oi, he said before he could stop himself, what are you doing? The look Naruto gave him was pretty obvious, despite the dark. He was looking at him like he was confused as to why he'd ask such a thing. And maybe that made sense. Hinata came over. She would always sit on Naruto's bed, playing games or watching movies with him. But that was during the day, and, for some reason, that made a big difference. Ellipsis. He watched carefully. Naruto got himself under his mountain of blankets, including the one Sasuke had thrown at him. He shrugged into his pillow and pulled everything up until it was just his that was uncovered. He sighed, he smiled, and he waited. Hinata sat on the edge of his bed, feet firm on the floor, with a hand resting on Naruto's chest. Things to note about that hand. It was not the one Sasuke had held the week before. It was not blushing with color. It just looked there. Like it just existed. Like it just waited. It didn't look like it was trying to convey something. Ellipsis. He wasn't really sure why that last observation needed to be addressed so openly to himself. Ellipsis. And then she touched him. Skin on skin kind of touch. Like holding hands, but way beyond that. Her hand lifted from his chest and, gently, began to trace the hills of his face. Her movement was smooth and calm, going across his forehead, sweeping his bangs from high tucking behind his ears and brushing the underside of his jaw. Naruto gave a loud, satisfied sigh, and his body seemed to just collapse in exhaustion. There you go, Hinata whispered. That's my handsome boy, Hinata. The laugh in Naruto's voice was light and tired. He snuggled further into his bed as she continued to trace shapes into his face. Ellipsis. Sasuke watched. Every second of it, he watched. From start to finish, to the point where Naruto's breathing turned steady. He watched when she pulled her hand away and pulled the curl blanket closer to his shoulders, and he watched when she leaned down and pressed her lips to the side of Naruto's cheek. I love you. Ellipsis. Sasuke was a tree, wooden, unmoving, straight, and when those eyes of hers turned onto him, the shaking got worse. Ellipsis. Do you? No. There was no way, absolutely no way in hell he was going to let her do all that to him. This was his room, his bed, somehow, that just meant she couldn't be there. And knew it sounded off, because she's been here so many times before, and he didn't have nearly as much of a problem with it then. Really, he wished he understood. Hinata slowly slipped off Naruto's bed, but did not approach him. Still, he just couldn't relax. Everything felt so twisted and ill inside. Okay, she said, voice soft and pleasant. Then I should go back. Yes, that would be good. Maybe he could calm down if she did. Ellipsis. He wanted her to go. If she did, he'd probably be able to eventually fall asleep. But at the same time, it was strange, but just the thought of her leaving, actually. She stopped and waited, listening. He could barely see her. She said nothing. She didn't even move. But when he imagined her face, he was sure it would have that sort of hopeful glow to it. And that just fucked everything up more. I changed my mind. What was he saying? You can. What? His father would kick his ass if he were there. Not because he had a girl there, in his room so late at night, but because he was letting her do the work. Uchihas were supposed to do things themselves. Relying on others was an embarrassment. God, if his father was here, he'd throw him into the wall. Ellipsis. But he wasn't. It was just him and Hinata. Is this all right? She sat on the very edge of his bed, giving him a lot of space to just breathe and move, that is, if he could move. His limbs still felt like branches made out of lead. The wall behind his neck was hot. He tried to focus on something else, on the light snoring of Naruto, or the way the blankets tightened around his legs when she sat next him, but he couldn't. It was really hot. Was he dying? Was he really that sick? He should have just let her leave. But what he was saying before, it was all lies. Even if she left, there was no way he could sleep. He'd be up for the rest of the night, twisted and tired, listening to tea outside the window. Sometimes, he might look over and think about how she had just been there, on Naruto's bed, tracing him to sleep, and then he'd get all tight and again. It was better that she was here. He told himself that as she loomed next to him, hands on her lap, not daring to move. Yeah, it was a chore to make himself lie down. It was like he had to manually push the buttons in his brain to move his limbs and slide his body onto the mattress. Hinata watched patiently, and when he was finally settled, she turned a bit more towards him. Ellipsis. If it makes you feel any better. Her hand rested on the mattress beside him, still not touching him. I promise I won't kiss you at the end. And, somehow, that made a lot of pressure collect in his lungs and blow out with one long exhale. He pressed his head into his pillow, eyes lidded, and nodded. Ellipsis. Things to note about this hand. It was the one that he held the other week. Even in the dark, he could see the vibrant pinks on the backs of her fingers. And when the pad of her thumb carefully touched the side of his head, somehow, it seemed different than how it had been for Naruto. Like there was purpose there. L meant something. Ellipsis. Her hand hovered around the side of his face for a while. It strayed on that patch of skin between ear and cheek and sometimes outlined his jaw, though she made sure to fall down onto his neck. Sometimes, the corner of her pinky touched the edge of his brow. He always felt her gaze fall on him in those circumstances, making sure he was all right, that she wasn't him. Scaring him. It wasn't scary. That wasn't the problem. He was just unused to it. He didn't know what to expect. See, can I ask you something? Her hand moved up to his temple to allow his jaw space to move as he spoke. When Naruto said, on the phone that you wanted to see me, no, he said. I didn't. Her tracing hand slowed, though it did not stop, and he could hear her swallow. Oh, fuck. That's not what I meant. What was he trying to say? Here. I did want to see you. Out of instinct, the muscles in his shoulders stiffened. What the hell? Oh, Hinata sighed, sounding relieved. Okay. She went back to tracing, a bit more effort in her fingers, and, well, it was weird, but just something about the mood him feel like she was smiling again. I wanted to see you, too. Now the bed was beginning to warm up significantly, and Sasuke curled his hands into the sheets. Ellipsis. But, he will admit that she did know what she was doing. Slowly, her fingers grew more confident and began to venture out away from the sides of his face. They followed the line of his nose and swept under his eyes, then circled around to gently press against his eyelids. Why was everything she did so gentle? Why did it not feel bad? Why did it make him feel like the night was glowing? You looked tense before, she whispered from above, but you look fine, now. Ellipsis. He dipped in and out of slumber for a couple of minutes. He'd fade into the dark, then return to the feeling of her hands playing through his bangs. The warmth of his bed encase him in sleep, and then he'd pull himself away just enough to Sasuke. Ellipsis. This is what a face felt like. This is what Hinata felt when she touched his. It was so soft and round. Her eyelashes were long under his thumb. Her chin was really small. The skin between her brows was really smooth. He could hold her entire cheek in his palm, and when he did, she leaned into him, eyes hazy and tired. Recharging, he murmured, right. Again, the air around her felt like it was smiling. Right. Ellipsis. Her hand relaxed on his forehead, like a cotton blanket. Sasuke. He heard his name. That was all he was aware of. I love you. And it felt like his mouth. MMN. But he wasn't too sure. Ellipsis. The unfamiliar pressure of something was what woke him up just as the sun was beginning to shine through the curtains. His eyes found the ceiling first, the whites a little in the early morning light. There was a shift to the side, and he looked over to see Naruto sitting up in his bed, rubbing his eyes. And when those blue eyes turned on him, he stared, and stared, then rubbed his eyes again and stared some more. Oh, he said, voice groggy. Wow, I guess I missed something last night, huh? Ellipsis. That pressure by him, upon further examination, happened to be a sleeping Hinata Hyuga on the edge of his bed, one leg tucked under the blanket as her hand lay next to face on the pillow. Ellipsis. Uchihas were mean bastards when they panicked. So he kicked her off the bed. Ellipsis. Thump. Ah. Oh shit, Hinata. Don't move. Your nose is bleeding. Naruto ran to grab a first aid kit in the hallway, and Hinata was trying her best to keep the flow of blood from her nose to a minimum as she sat, hunched over, on the floor. God, he felt like such an asshole. Hey, he said, then stopped, not really sure what else to say. And, for whatever reason, she started laughing. It didn't help the whole process of keeping blood inside her, but still, she laughed. You really know how to wake someone up. I didn't mean it, he tried to defend himself. I didn't think you'd be there. I thought you went back. Her eyes gleamed up at him. Purples were already beginning to kiss the sides of her nose, and her face was smeared with red, but, somehow, I was recharging, I guess. She looked kinda nice. There was something contagious about the feeling of someone's weight leaning entirely on you. It was hard to describe, kind of like swinging. When you're a kid and your feet are stretched forward, and as you swing back, you expect there to be someone behind pushing you forward, keeping you moving, pushing you up, up, up. Sasuke Uchiha was pushing Hinata, keeping her up, up, up. He was starting to wonder about her. Not at a stalkerish level. It was a friendly wonder. When he thought about her, it was in the same manner a friend would. He thought about her throughout the day the same way he thought about, did her class end early like she said it would? Is she eating lunch alone, or with Kiba? Is she keeping ice on her nose? Whatever happened with that exam she had 2 days ago? This was normal for him to do. His father told him not to concern himself with others. It was a slippery slope. Care about one person, and suddenly, the whole world is on your back, and you no longer have the capability to think and act for yourself. You become a slave for the system. That's how they get you. They play into your empathy. Uchihas don't have empathy. Ellipsis. Except for this one. Don't tell his father. He'd kill him. But because he wasn't supposed to care for others, Sasuke never really knew how to express these concerns beyond the cave of his mind. He just thought about others, raw acting on them. It was best that way. He couldn't get punished that way. Where is she? But, sometimes, he found his wonders of Hinata Hyuga to change, to morph right before his very eyes. It would start as a question he'd ask in regards to Naruto, then, I want to see her. And then it got twisted and weird. He couldn't make sense of it. I want to talk to her. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Ellipsis. Why does she do that? Naruto looked up from scrolling on his phone, giving a rather perplexed peer across the room, in the direction of where Sasuke sat on the floor. It's been 3 days, but H couldn't be on that bed anymore. Every time he tried, he'd feel hands on his face, coaxing him to sleep. It was unnerving. Who? Hinata. What? He shouldn't be annoyed at him, because of course Naruto hadn't a clue what the hell he was talking about. But the glare was in his eyes before he could stop himself, and Sasuke said, why does she always say that? The immediate spark in those damn eyes was enough to tell Sasuke he understood exactly what he was getting at, but Naruto only leaned back into his bed and played do like he always did. Say what, Naruto? He bit out. He grinned. I don't know what you're talking about. Alright, fine. He could play it that way for all he cared. It didn't matter to him. And because it didn't matter to him, Sasuke pushed himself to his feet and threw things into his backpack, intending to get out of that aggravating room to go study some in private. Where are you going? Naruto asked. Does it matter? Okay. Whoa, maybe he did care. His voice was entirely too pissed. Out. He pushed his shoulder into the door, and Naruto called, why are you so curious? Ellipsis. And wasn't that the question? Why? Why was he curious? I don't know. Ellipsis. He didn't have to look back to feel the change in the air. Naruto's effect on the atmosphere was always so obvious. It's not a happy story. It was kind of hard to believe. Sasuke had trouble imagining anything around Hinata's life as unhappy. She was always smiling so genuinely. It just felt off to think of any but that. And though he did not need to look back, he did. The devastation in Naruto's face was the kind he's only seen once in his life, the kind he was the cause of in the past. It made him nauseous, and Sasuke stumbled into the hallway and shut the door behind him before he felt as though he could collapse. Ellipsis. It felt like swinging, this feeling. He wanted to see her, but he didn't. Both at the same time, constantly back and forth. He felt unbalanced. He felt sick. Are you alright? And wasn't that the question? Ellipsis. He knew he shouldn't be mad at her, as well. She just saw him standing in the middle of the grounds, doing absolutely nothing, staring off into his little world. She didn't know what was roaring in his head, what was weighing down his entire person. She didn't know. She didn't know. So he swallowed down the poison that coated his throat, and asked, "What are you doing?" Ellipsis. Sunflowers. He's only seen drawings of those. Why did she have 2 bouquets of them? Ah. Her eyes reflected the yellow of the petals, bringing a splash of color to her. For whatever reason, she didn't seem as colorful as she usually did. Oh, sorry. I'm just to take the bus somewhere. Her nose was still purple. Her knuckles still blushed. What was it? What was off? When Sasuke tore his gaze away from the flowers, he looked down at her dark clothes and small, black slip-ons, and it was then he realized, and he understood. Ellipsis. Let me come with you. Uchihas weren't supposed to care. They weren't supposed to be empathetic. They weren't supposed to show concern. But those were his father's rules, and he wasn't here right now. Hinata, I want to come with you. The plastic surrounding the flowers crinkled as her fingers shifted, and she gave an awkward, almost forced smile. All right. Ellipsis. They sat together on the bus, each of them holding a bouquet. They bounced together. They shifted together. Her left leg was hooked over her right, and every so often, it would dip in a song Sasuke almost recognized. The toe of her slip-on would sometimes brush the side of his K and she would stop and apologize and blush in shame, but a minute down the way, her face would cool, and she'd dip her foot in a tune once again. Sasuke kept to himself, because he didn't know what to say. Because he was new to this sort of thing. Because after the 5th time around, he realized that song she bobbed her foot to was a distracting melody that he would use whenever he was locked in his room because father was too angry or too drunk. It was a song to pass time. It was a song to help you think about something else, if even for a little bit. Ellipsis. When they got off the bus, they had to walk 4 blocks south and another 2 east to reach the graveyard. It was a well-kept one, at least. The headstones were clean. The grass was mowed. Hinata took him to a place in the back. This is my sister, Hanabi, she told him, gesturing to one of the stones before them. Then her chin nodded to the one to its left. And this is my cousin, Neji. This is Sasuke met him at college. She leaned down and placed the sunflowers on each of them, making sure the bouquets leaned against the headstones so that the petals would not be ruined. But the same concern didn't come for her own clothes as she sat on the dirt before them, crossing her legs, getting comfortable. Her eyes tipped up to him, wondering what he was going with himself, and he just sighed and sat next to her. Ellipsis. She told them stories like they were alive. He hated to think of it that way, but that was the first thought that came to his mind. Her hands moved with the flow of her words as she spoke, and her voice was animated. She laughed when she told them about Naruto almost breaking one of the mics at karaoke. She grinned when she told them how Shino was still winning competitions with his tarantulas, and that she ought to bring them some of the photos he takes of she spoke to them like they were breathing in there. And, Sasuke, what was it that Kiba did after that? He drank the entire box of coffee. Like a dumbass. And so did he. Ellipsis. There was an art to reading the room and finding the best time to ask certain, tricky questions. Uchiha's thought art was for chumps. Are they why you always say that? They had just left the graveyard, where, mind you, Hinata's past sister and cousin were laid to rest. Now they were waiting at the bus stop, and Hinata had fallen into obvious state of melancholy. This was not the right time to ask such a question. Ellipsis. Why was he like this? It's important, you know, she told him, to let the people you love know that you do. It's really important. He was seeing the signs already. The gurgle in her throat when she spoke. The way her eyes kept blinking. They left after a fight we had. It was something stupid. I told them I never wanted to see them again. Her fingers were shaking. The cords in her throat throbbed as she struggled to get out every word she said. They died after that. The last thing I told them was that I never wanted to see them again. They died thinking that. She was crying. Of course she was. But, still, Sasuke didn't know what else to do but state the obvious. And now I'm so scared that it will happen again. And I'm sorry if it gets annoying, but if something ever happened to my friends, to Naruto, to you, I'd want why at least know you were loved every step of the way. I couldn't live with myself if you thought otherwise. When the bus came, he put a hand on her head and made her bow it so no one could see. She followed him to the back, and he let her sit by the window so she had at least little privacy. Sasuke, she whispered as the bus started up, I love you. Ellipsis. He'd be a bastard to not say it back after that whole speech. Before, it was just words. It was just the thing Hinata Hyuga did. But now he knew it was so much more important than that. Me too. Ellipsis. Her head leaned onto his shoulder, her hands curling around the sleeve of his coat. She shivered and looked ready to collapse, but he stayed tall, and he stayed still. He kept her up. The bouquets weren't there to distract their hands anymore, so when Hinata slipped down and threaded her fingers through his, he drummed that song they both knew so well into her knuckles. Ellipsis. I think you saved me today, Sasuke. You're just saying that. He pressed the button to her floor, then his. The elevator doors closed slowly, and they both shifted when they felt as though they were being lifted up into the sky. I mean it, she said. Thank you for coming. I'm glad it was you. He just pressed his back against the wall and watched the number over the door slowly count up. A ding rang between them as the elevator stopped, but even as the door opened, Hinata didn't move. Hey, he said, it's your floor. She just looked at him, like he was the only thing that existed. What was he supposed to do with that? How was he supposed to deal with that? The doors slid shut before his hand could reach the button to keep them open, and the elevator moved once again. Sasuke, Hinata said, can you say it again? Please. Just one more time. He sneered down at her. No way. I won't ask you again. It's not happening. When she stepped forward, he couldn't move back anymore. He was already against the wall. He was trapped. One more time, she begged. Just one. Just one. Ellipsis. Why was this so important to her? Seriously. Sasuke, I love you. Seriously. I love you, too. Ellipsis. Don't smile like that, he wanted to tell her. Because it was weird. He didn't know how else to explain it. Hinata leaned forward and took his right hand from his side and held it like she was inspecting his palm. He didn't get it for a second, but then she pulled it to her face and pressed her lips into the lines of his hands, and he couldn't breathe. It was impossible. His ribs were stuck in his throat. His lungs were decaying. Something was wrong. Wrong. Why couldn't he breathe? The door opened. His legs took him out of the elevator. He wasn't even in control of where he was walking. All he knew was that when he finally got inside his room, God. His legs gave out. The only thing keeping him up was the door behind his back, and he gasped and choked and breathed. Fucking, Sasuke, what the hell? Naruto looked at him like he was dying. Maybe he was. That could be it. Can someone lose their lungs and still live? If someone stole his lungs in the middle of the night, as his roommate slept in the bed a few feet away, would he die instantly? Or was there a way to keep him alive, him living? Hinata Hyuga must have been a witch, or something. She brought the dead back to life, and he didn't want her to stop. The goal of the day was to not think about his right hand. Hey, did you, hurt your wrist or something? He was failing. It was like when someone new entered the room, you just immediately became aware of them. Even when you try to ignore them, a part of your subconscious keeps track that person, following where they go and what they do. Only in this case, this was Sasuke's hand, and even when he tried to ignore it, he could constantly feel Hinata's kiss his palm. Ellipsis. Kiss. Huh, didn't that sound a bit too intimate? But it was true, wasn't it? She had kissed him. Hand, he told himself, heart climbing up his throat. It was my hand. Just my hand. But that hand was his. It was connected to him. Sometimes, he wanted to just cut it off, but he couldn't. Hinata also used that hand to recharge. It was important. Ellipsis. And, you know, he needed it for daily activities and such. That too. Ellipsis. Maybe this was also normal for her. That night a while back, when she had snuck up to their dorm room to help Naruto go to sleep, she had kissed him. Maybe there were levels of friendship where it was just common for them to kiss one another, and maybe, last night, he and Hinata had reached that level. But he's never had a friend before who has done such a thing like that to him. Naruto never has, and he's been friends with Naruto since high school. So was it a friend thing, or a Hinata thing? And why did it matter so much? Oh my god, seriously, just spill it, already. Naruto threw his manga onto the foot of his bed before plopping down onto the mattress, his entire body facing Sasuke, who lay on his makeshift bed on the floor that con of piled quilts and pillows and sheets. Naruto had told him he acted as if there were bugs in his bed. Sasuke thought there might as well be. Spill what? Don't even begin to give me that shit. Naruto looked exhausted, but not in the normal sense. It was more like he was tired of having to live in that room that was so antsy and awkward. It was getting on his nerves. Even Sasuke could tell that much. You barely get any sleep at night. You're always reacting as if something's gonna jump through the door and kill you, and the worst part is that you're sighing and groaning like you were just dumped. Sasuke's face twisted in disgust. I am not. There's obviously something on your mind, Naruto said, frowning, and if you don't fucking tell me already, I'll strangle it out of you. And he looked like he wasn't joking when he said that. Sasuke hated the idea of it, but maybe talking about it would help a bit. Staying in his Uchiha hole and languishing by himself wasn't helping. It was messy, and it was artless, but Sasuke eventually found the will to speak. Say someone kisses you, holy fuck, Naruto exclaimed, jumping off his bed, half of his sheets coming with him. Someone kissed you. Who? No one. Sasuke snapped. It's hypothetical, dumbass. But, can I finish? Naruto gritted his jaw, but stayed quiet. If someone kissed you, but they're your friend, is that normal? Naruto blinked. Huh. The corner of his mouth curled up in thought as he rubbed the side of his neck. Normal. It depends, maybe. There are some places in the world that's common, you know. Like Bolivia, I think. Or something. Is she from Bolivia? He wasn't 100% sure where Hinata was from, but she didn't really look Bolivian. No, he eventually answered. Then maybe this friend just likes you. Is there another reason? Sasuke asked. There has to be. Naruto peered down at him like a parent would to a child who was acting up. It made Sasuke feel immature, like he was running from something, like he was making a big out of nothing, and maybe he was. But he's never dealt with something like this before. He didn't know what to do. I guess she could just kiss people as a way of saying hello or goodbye. No, he knew how Hinata said goodbye, and it definitely wasn't that. Then maybe as thanks. No, Hinata has thanked him plenty of times without having to kiss him. Then, man, I don't know. Naruto rubbed at his head like it hurt, and he collapsed back onto his bed. No matter how I look at it, this chick likes you. But that couldn't be why. Sasuke didn't want that to be the reason, because every time he thought about it, about her possibly liking him, it made him feel sick and unbalanced. He'd get all tense sore. There was no way. Hinata kissed you. The gasp that came from Naruto was revolutionary, like Sasuke had said something that completely rocked him off course. You're right. His blue eyes swam in a similar panic that Sasuke was currently drowning in, but then he shook his head and raised his hands up in defense. But that's different. Hinata. She's like my mom. Yeah, you know, like coming over when I feel down and making food for me. She hugs me all the time and stuff. That's what moms do, right? Sasuke couldn't think of a single time his mother did that, but he supposed not many mothers were like his. Alright, okay, so maybe Hinata was acting like a mom to him, as well. That's why she kissed him. His hand, that is. That could be it. Ellipsis. I guess I wasn't much help, huh? No, Sasuke said, standing from his pile of sheets and blankets, you helped. Naruto didn't look completely convinced, but he reached over for his manga and returned to reading it. If you feel up to it, then, he said, we're still meeting up with everyone tonight. Yeah, that was one of the reasons why he could barely get a moment of sleep last night, because he knew Hinata would be at that gathering, and he didn't know how to around her anymore. But now he understood. Mom. She was like his mom. I'll go. He just had to keep telling himself that. The problem with telling yourself something over and over again, eventually, you'll start thinking about it too hard, and a whole different mess will arise. Ellipsis. The mess trademark came in 4 waves. He thought about how irresponsible Hinata was, like when she'd just give her scarf and jacket to random people at college despite the temperature outside being below freezing. He was the one offering his coat and getting on her for it. That wasn't very motherly. He thought about how emotional she was. She cried at things like not being able to be with her friends for a few days. He was the one who had to comfort her. That wasn't motherly. He thought about how he was the one who went with her to the graveyard, how he was the one who supported her through all of that, how he was the one looking out for if she was more like his mother, wouldn't the roles be flipped? So, what did that say about him? He didn't want to think about it. Ellipsis. So, maybe Hinata wasn't like his mom. Then why did she, Sasuke? Hello. They had all decided to meet up at the park rink a few blocks away from campus, but it was still way too cold to do anything outside, so the moment everyone showed up winter coats and scarves, they made their way downtown to hop between shops and cafes. Kiba and Naruto were fucking around like they usually did. Ino was in charge of pulling the group into this or that store, and suddenly, Sasuke found himself surrounded by sweaters and mugs and wall decorations and Hinata. She looked like she usually did, and at least this time she was appropriately dressed. But, as expected, that wasn't exactly on the top of Sasuke's priority list. He thought he'd be fine coming. And, sure, he wasn't in immediate danger. He was dying. She wasn't killing him, but seeing her made him forget how to breathe again, and his hand hurt like hell. Uchihas are mean bastards when they panic. He really didn't want to be. He didn't want to be like his father. He was trying. He was. But it never seemed good enough. He ignored her, and he left. And he hated himself for it. Ellipsis. She didn't approach him again after that. But, still, every now and then, he'd feel that colorful weight of her attention on him. It stuck a knife clear and deep into his back, but she wasn't glaring at him. That wasn't. It hurt. It was because he felt bad for being an Uchiha, for acting like his father. He wanted to explain that to her. It's not your fault, he'd tell her. It's never your fault. I'm just stupid and I don't know what I'm doing. But he didn't have the courage to go to her, and every time he felt her gaze on him and looked her way, she wasn't looking back. Ellipsis. When they got to a cafe, she had herself snuggled between Shino and Kiba, drinking up the affection that they could give her so openly, so perfectly. What could he do? What? Run away? Ignore her? He didn't have the right, he knew he didn't, but he had a really angry feeling when he thought hard about it. When he saw her leaning into them and holding their hands. Do you kiss them, too? He wanted to yell at her. Is that just what you do? You just kiss everyone you like. But, really, what right did he have? That was how Hinata was. She liked people. She recharged with them, and they liked her. People liked her. He liked her. Ellipsis. He shouldn't have come. Ellipsis. It was getting way too late, and once they all were able to pay their bill, they decided it was time to go their separate ways. Hinata, Naruto whined, wrapping his shoulders around her as she tried to pull her coat off the back of her chair. I drank way too much coffee. There's no way I'll be able to sleep without your help. Sasuke didn't miss the quick peek she sent his way before turning to Naruto. If it's really okay, she said, I'll come. He grinned into her neck and hugged her tight enough to break her. Then come on, Naruto, Sasuke called. You left your fucking card, but he and Hinata were already out the doors, and Sasuke sighed as he rounded the table and swiped Naruto's credit card and receipt from the table. Damn him, he looked down at the paper in his hand. He knew we were going to be out late. Why did he have to? And he had expected at least 6 cappuccinos piled with whipped cream and shit, but there wasn't anything there. Just a small house salad. Ellipsis. Hinata being in their room again was the worst thing that could happen that night. Sasuke wanted to strangle Naruto. Now was not the time to play these sorts of games. You're a lifesaver, Naruto said to Hinata, cuddled up in his bed. What would I do without you? Well, tonight, he would sleep perfectly fine. The lights weren't even off for more than 3 minutes, and Sasuke could tell he had already fallen asleep. He didn't even try to stay up and pretend for Hinata. But she seemed to mind. She just slowly pulled her hands away from his face, leaned over like she had the other night, then stopped herself. She didn't move for a moment, and when she finally did, it was away from Naruto. And Sasuke really, started to hate himself. Ellipsis. You didn't have to do that, he said, without thinking. Shit. What was he thinking? Hinata slipped from Sasuke's bed and stood a little away from where Sasuke lay on the floor. Her eyes were heavy, stuck to the floor, not even looking at him. He wanted them to, but he also did. It was maddening. He just couldn't make up his mind. You didn't have to stop, he said. If it was for my sake, then don't worry about it. She just listened. She just stood there and listened. Anyone else would have left. Why did she? I don't care. Her hands snapped to her mouth, trying to hide her hiccup, but he heard it. She was crying. He made her cry. Ellipsis. His father had said it was a powerful, magical thing, making the enemy cry. Uchihas were born to hate. There was something in them that they could just reach into and use to their advantage. Like poison, or daggers, or acid, Uchihas could just reach inside and throw it all at someone, hurting them, making them bleed, making them burn, making them sob. His father said it was best when it was the stubborn ones, the ones who tried to hide and pretend they weren't crying. Sasuke was one of those people. He understood. He understood how absolutely painful it was to hide something so forceful. It was like you were fighting against your entire body. It was like you were fighting off your humanity. You had to kill yourself practically because dead people don't cry. They don't cry. Ellipsis. But Hinata wasn't an enemy. He didn't want to throw acid on her. He didn't want to cut her. He didn't want to poison her. He didn't. Don't make him. Please don't make him. Ellipsis. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry. Her hands dripped like venom down her face, and she didn't hide her sob this time. It's not your fault. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, she whispered. You did nothing wrong. He wanted her to just understand and stop crying. Of course, I did, she said. I can never do anything right. Somehow, that made the panic in his chest turn hot and pissed. Will you stop that? He hissed, just barely keeping his voice low enough to not wake Naruto. Just listen, T shouldn't have ignored you. I was being stupid. You didn't do anything wrong. Listen to me, Hinata. She hiccuped again and wiped at her face, now looking at him. Her face was glowing. That was all he could think about for a while. You're not stupid, Sasuke, she said, after a while. He frowned. Then I'm a fucking moron. Don't say that. She crawled down onto her knees so that she was on his level now. You're just not used to these things. It's not your fault, either. He didn't say anything more on that. Either way, I'm sorry. With her hands at her lap, he could clearly see her smile. It's okay, Sasuke. I'm sorry for being so weird. I was just scared you hated me. I don't. Oh, okay. Good. And then, for whatever strange reason, she started laughing. What? He asked. She shook her head and reached out to touch the hem of one of his blankets. I'm sorry, I just realized, why are you sleeping on the floor? After the conversation they just had, there was no way he could say it was because of her. So he just said, I've had trouble sleeping. It was partially true, after all. Ellipsis. It was like Sasuke could read her mind. She didn't do anything. She didn't say anything. It was just something about her that made him follow her line of thinking. So when she asked, do you want me to help? He already had his answer. Yes. Ellipsis. They picked up his blankets and pillows and sheets together and rearranged them back on his bed, and when that was done, he slid into bed, and she sat at his side, like time. I won't try to fall asleep this time, she told him, grinning. And he smirked back. If you do, I'll try not to kick you off. Ellipsis. It was just like last time. She touched his face and traced his features, and the tension in his body disappeared. Hinata might have been magic. Or something. Ellipsis. Why did you do that? The words just wouldn't leave his tongue, so he raised his right hand enough so she could see it. Her face instantly went red, and her fingers stilled on his jaw. You, tell me the truth, he said. I won't get mad. Her body shifted a tad, and a bit of her hair fell in her face. Because I love you, ellipsis. She said those words to him so many times. But, this time, they sounded different. Maybe because she said them that way, or maybe because he heard them that way. He could feel her heartbeat in the pad of her thumb. Sometimes, her wrist would brush the side of his neck, and he could feel it there, too. It was so fast. It was like it was racing with his. And Sasuke didn't know whose would be winning. Ellipsis. He got a little tired, but when he felt her breath on his chin, he woke up almost instantly. There was that look again, hovering over him, glowing with color that the night could not overwhelm. It made you feel like you were the most important person in the world, made you feel like you could carry an entire continent on your shoulders. It filled him with a sort of astounding confidence that he hasn't felt in a long time. If you want to, then I will. So he kissed her. Ellipsis. There were supposed to be things he noticed. Right, isn't that what's supposed to happen when you kiss someone? Aren't you supposed to taste their chapstick, or maybe the warmth of their mouth? Sasuke didn't notice any of that. He was way too caught up in how her mouth opened, and how he opened his, and how she sucked in and stole the lungs right from his chest. All that was left was an empty cavity, squeezing, tightening, collapsing on him. His heart yelped, his throat burned, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't breathe, and then she pulled away, and he gasped and choked and sunk his hands into his mattress. How was he still alive? He should be dead, right? And Hinata, that thief, just sucked in a gallon of oxygen before leaning down and capturing his mouth again. Maybe that was why he was alive. Because of her. Because she was giving him her color, and he could see the stars at night. Ellipsis. He didn't know how they got there, but his hands were in her hair, and when she pulled away, he didn't let her go too far. Her eyelashes looked pink against her skin, and she kept her eyes shut and leaned her head against his. The world was tipping. Sasuke felt so dizzy, it was like his brain was asleep, but the rest of him was acutely awake. It probably had to do with his missing lungs, but that problem for a different time. Hinata caught her breath, and Sasuke stayed breathless and just watched her move and live and thrum with life. I've never done this before, she confessed softly into his bangs. I've never kissed someone before. You kissed Naruto, he said, and she blushed. That's different. Naruto had said the same thing, but Sasuke still didn't understand it completely. You kissed me. At that, Hinata laughed. I guess you're right. She slid down his body to rest her head against his shoulder. Can I tell you something weird? Go ahead. Ever since I first met you, I've wanted to kiss you. She was trying to steal his heart, too, so Sasuke pulled one of his hands from her pixie cut and slapped it over his mouth. Christ. Jesus Christ. At first, I thought you were dating Naruto. Her head snapped up, and she stared at him. Sasuke. But, I guess after that, I probably felt the same way. Ellipsis. He thought he would have been scared, or, not scared, but, uncomfortable. But it didn't feel bad. It didn't feel strange. It didn't feel weird. So he leaned his head off his pillow and kissed her again, opening her mouth with the persuasion of his own, hoping to steal her lungs, as well. Ellipsis. When he woke up, she wasn't there, and Naruto was playing one of his games with the volume off. So how'd it go? He asked, not looking over at him. Did you guys make up? When he remembered all that had happened, that overwhelming confidence from before was nowhere in sight, and Sasuke practically fell out of his bed and almost knocked head into the side table. Shit, man, Naruto hissed. What the hell is, I kissed her. The mashing of buttons stopped. What? I kissed her, he repeated, because even he could hardly believe it. I kissed her like, I don't know. I kissed her a lot. He lost count after the third one. You did, yes, Naruto, he snapped. Me, dude, when I invited her over, it was to stop whatever stupid fight you guys were having. I wasn't expecting you to make out with her. Sasuke finally found the power to stand, and he glared at him. Wait, Naruto gasped, forgetting his game altogether. Don't tell me, was it Hinata who kissed you and made you all weird yesterday? What? That was hypothetical. Bullshit. It totally was. Now Naruto was standing, too, and pacing around. Oh man, I can't believe it. There's no way I'll be able to invite her over again without thinking about it. Don't think about it, Sasuke muttered. Just stop thinking about it. Gah, gross. It's like you made out with my mom. Will you stop? He was going to kill him. Ellipsis. Over cups of instant ramen, they both tried to think of ways to address the elephant of the room. But, really, neither of them were really good at that, so when Naruto just out with it, Sasuke was a little relieved. So you're dating her? Oh, dating. I don't think so. Naruto gave him a look. So you just kissed her for no reason? It just happened. They slurped at their noodles, and then Naruto tried again. If she wanted to date, though, would you? The thought made his ribs rattle, and he said, I don't know anything about it, though. Everyone starts somewhere, Naruto suggested. Ellipsis. And he was right. Then, maybe, I guess. Oh, boy, am I going to have to give you the talk. Don't hurt her and stuff, yada yada. Sasuke squinted. Are you my dad? Gross. Then Hinata would be, a grandma. Stop. You made out with a grandma. Naruto, stop.